TYcoon abandoned his poor wife and their children, but fate had other plans. It was a rainy spring afternoon in Seoul, the kind where the city feels like it's holding its breath. The streets shimmered under the weight of the drizzle, and in a small, cozy cafe tucked away in a quiet alley, a girl with tired eyes and a hopeful smile served steaming cups of coffee to strangers who never really looked at her. Her name was Hannah. She wasn't special by society's standards, just another girl working long shifts to help her aging grandmother and pay for night classes. But there was something about her. The way she listened when people spoke. The way she smiled, even when her shoes were soaked and her hands numb from the cold. She had a quiet kind of beauty, the kind that bloomed slowly in the heart. That's where Daniel first saw her. He was standing outside the cafe, hiding from the rain under a sleek black umbrella. He was tall, sharply dressed in a tailored suit, and clearly out of place in the modest little street. His driver had taken a wrong turn and left him at the wrong address, but instead of calling to be picked up, something made him pause. Through the window, he saw Hannah, laughing as she wiped down a table, her hair pulled into a messy bun, her cheeks flushed from the heat of the espresso machine. And for the first time in a long time, Daniel felt curious. He pushed open the door. The little bell above the entrance jingled, and Hannah turned around. Their eyes met. "Welcome," she said with a bow. "Please, take any seat you like." He sat down quietly, not removing his coat or even checking his phone. When she brought the menu, he didn't open it. "I'll have whatever you recommend," he said, his voice deep and calm. Hannah smiled. "Are you sure? I make a mean honey latte. Then I'll trust you." As she worked behind the counter, she glanced at him now and then. He wasn't like the usual businessmen who passed through. There was a kind of stillness to him, controlled yet distant, like someone who had everything and still felt empty. When she placed the latte in front of him, she offered him a napkin with a smiley face drawn on it. "For good luck," she said softly. Daniel raised an eyebrow, then smiled just a little. From that day on, he came back. Once, then twice, then every evening like clockwork. He never said much at first, just sat with his coffee and watched the rain through the window. But Hannah talked about her grandmother's cooking, about her dream of studying early childhood education, about the stray cat that kept sneaking into the cafe storeroom. Daniel listened. Little by little, the space between them closed. One night, the cafe was closing early due to a power outage. Hannah stood outside, fumbling with her umbrella as the rain poured. Daniel stepped beside her, holding his umbrella over them both. "Let me walk you home." She blinked. "You don't even know where I live." "Then let me find out." They walked slowly through the wet streets, her laughter breaking the silence when he slipped on a puddle and cursed under his breath. "You're not as graceful as you look," she teased. He chuckled, a rare sound. "No one's ever said that to me before." When they reached her small apartment, she turned to him, hesitating. The rain was soft now, more of a whisper than a storm. "Thank you," she said, her voice barely above the drizzle. Daniel looked at her, and for the first time, the cold mask he wore began to melt. He reached out, gently brushing a strand of wet hair from her cheek. "You make me feel like I'm someone worth knowing, Hannah." She didn't respond with words. She just stood there, letting the moment speak for itself. Weeks turned into months. Their secret meetings became the brightest part of Daniel's rigid life. She was warmth. She was honesty. She was everything his world lacked. But his world was unforgiving. He never told her his full name, never spoke about his family, or the corporation waiting for him to step in as CEO. He wanted to keep this piece of his life untouched by expectation, by duty, by pressure. But fate doesn't care for secrets. One afternoon, Hannah sat across from him in a quiet park, her fingers trembling slightly. "I need to tell you something," she said, her eyes filled with both fear and hope. "I'm pregnant." Daniel froze. The world seemed to fall silent. The birds stopped chirping. The wind held its breath. He looked at her, and all the air left his lungs. "Are you sure?" She nodded, eyes shining with tears. "Yes, I wanted to tell you because I want to do this right." I know it's not ideal. I know we're different. But I love you, Daniel. I really do." Her voice cracked on the last word. Daniel looked down at his hands. He felt his walls crumbling. The image of his mother's icy face, the weight of the empire waiting for him, the expectations he'd been raised under. They all came rushing back. But when he looked at Hannah, all he saw was a future he didn't know he wanted until now. He reached for her hand. "I'll take care of you," he whispered. "I promise." They married quietly, in a small ceremony attended only by Hannah's grandmother and a few neighbors. It was simple but filled with love, and for a short while they were happy. She cooked for him. He read to her belly at night. They picked names for the babies, twins, the doctor said. 2 boys, 2 heartbeats, 2 lives growing from a love that defied the odds. But reality has a cruel way of catching up. Daniel's father collapsed from a heart attack. The board demanded Daniel step in. His mother discovered the marriage and stormed into his office one cold morning with photos, documents, threats. "She will ruin you," she hissed. "Do you really think this girl belongs in our world? You have one chance to fix this, Daniel. Choose." He stood there paralyzed. Later that night, he came home late. Hannah was waiting with dinner and 2 little knitted hats she made for the babies. "I thought they'd be cute," she said, holding them up, beaming. Daniel couldn't look her in the eyes. "Hannah," he began. She froze. Something in his voice was wrong. "I'm sorry," he whispered, the words like blades in his throat. I can't do this anymore." Her smile faded. "What do you mean?" "My family, if they find out, everything I've worked for will disappear. They'll destroy you, Hannah. And I can't throw everything away." She took a step back, the color draining from her face. "You're choosing them over us?" He said nothing. The silence between them roared. Tears streamed down her cheeks, but she didn't sob. She stood tall. "Then go," she said, her voice broken. "But don't come back when you regret it. Don't come back when you finally realize what you lost." He left without another word. And Hannah, standing in the doorway with 2 tiny hats clutched to her chest, whispered into the night, "I'll raise them without you, and they'll never need to know what it's like to be abandoned." The rain fell again. She hadn't told her grandmother everything, just that Daniel had been forced to travel for work, that he might be gone a long while. But her grandmother was no fool. She'd seen the emptiness in Hannah's eyes, the way she paused too long in doorways, the way she flinched at the sound of the phone, hoping, then sinking. Every night, Hannah waited. She waited for a knock on the door, a call, a message, anything. But silence was the only reply. When the twins were born, she was alone. Not a single familiar face in the delivery room. She screamed through the pain, biting down on her own arm to muffle the sobs as the contractions ripped through her. And when the nurses placed the tiny boys in her arms, her tears spilled over. Not just from the pain, but from the unbearable ache of knowing Daniel would never see this. She named them Minjun and Haru, 2 little boys with tufts of dark hair and eyes that mirrored his. At night, when they cried in unison and her body trembled from exhaustion, she whispered lullabies through cracked lips. Sometimes, she imagined Daniel watching them sleep. Sometimes she cursed his name through clenched teeth. But no matter the emotion, she never let it reach the boys. They would grow up loved, whole, not knowing what had broken their mother. Life was cruel, yes, but Hannah refused to be. Years passed. The twins grew fast, mischievous, clever, full of energy. Minjun was bold, curious, always asking why. Haru was quieter, sensitive, with a knack for comforting others, even as a child. Together, they were Hannah's heart, her reason to wake up, to fight, to keep breathing. She found work as a part-time teacher in a local preschool. The pay was low, the hours long, but it gave her purpose. Her students adored her, and slowly her reputation grew. Parents spoke of her patience, her kindness. One even helped her apply for a training program. Bit by bit, she built a new life from the ashes of the old one. But shadows don't vanish, they wait. In a cold, glass-walled office high above Seoul, Daniel Co sat behind a desk too large for one man. His face was harder now, jaw more defined, eyes colder. The world knew him as a rising star, a visionary CEO who'd taken his father's company to global heights. Interviews praised his strategic mind. His engagement to Eun-ji, daughter of a powerful politician, made headlines. But none of it meant anything. At night, alone in his penthouse, he would pour himself a drink and stare out over the city. He hadn't seen Hannah since the day he walked out. He told himself it was for the best, that he'd done the right thing, that she and the children now were better off without the chaos of his world. But sometimes, in the middle of the night, he'd dream of her voice, her touch, the way she used to look at him as if he wasn't just the heir to a fortune, but a man worth loving. He tried to ignore it, until one morning, his mother stormed into his office, a folder in hand, her expression like a blade. "There are rumors," she snapped, slamming the folder onto his desk. "That girl, she's still in the country, teaching at some back-alley daycare. And apparently she has children." He stared at the photos, blurry, distant shots of Hannah outside a small school building. She was laughing with 2 boys beside her. His hands trembled. What do you mean, children?" His mother crossed her arms. "I had her followed. The twins are yours." The world tilted. The room spun. He tried to breathe, but it felt like his lungs had forgotten how. "She never told me. She didn't have to. You left her, like I told you to. And now you're gonna clean this up before someone else finds out. You're engaged. You're set to finalize a government contract next month. This scandal cannot surface." Daniel looked at the photographs again. They were so small. One was holding a toy robot, the other clutching a picture he'd drawn. His children. "Leave," he said quietly. "What?" "I said leave." His mother hesitated, then scoffed and walked out, heels clicking like gunshots against the marble floor. When the door closed, Daniel pressed the photo to his chest and let himself shatter. That weekend, under a gray sky, Daniel drove to the outskirts of the city. The road narrowed into hills and village streets. He followed the address in the file until he saw it. A small preschool with faded paint and hand-painted signs. He parked the car and waited. Minutes passed. Then she appeared. She hadn't changed, not really. Her hair was longer, pulled into a loose braid. Her eyes, though, held years. Years of struggle, of grief, of strength. She didn't see him yet, but he couldn't move. He sat there, hands frozen on the steering wheel, heart pounding so hard it hurt. He watched her laugh with the children, pick up a crying student, kiss his forehead. Then she turned. Their eyes met, and the world stopped. She froze. Her smile vanished. She stood perfectly still, as if time had folded in on itself. He stepped out of the car. "Hannah," he said, voice hoarse. She blinked once, then again. Her hand reached instinctively for the twins behind her. "What are you doing here?" Her voice was sharp, controlled. I had to see you. I didn't know." "You don't get to say that," she snapped. "You don't get to show up now, after all this time, and say you didn't know." He took a step closer, but she raised a hand. "Don't," she said, voice cracking. "Don't take another step." The twins peeked out from behind her, curious, confused. Daniel's eyes locked onto them. Minjun tilted his head. "Mom, who is that man?" Hannah knelt beside them, her voice trembling as she said, "No one, sweetheart, just someone from the past." Daniel's heart split. He wanted to scream, to beg, to fall on his knees, but he had no right. He had lost that the moment he walked away. Still, he whispered, "They're mine, aren't they?" Hannah didn't answer. She simply looked at him, tears in her eyes. And for the first time in his life, Daniel Co felt powerless. Not because of stocks or rivals or boardrooms, but because he had the quiet hum of the ceiling fan filled the room, the soft breaths of her boys curled beside her on the futon. Yet her eyes remained fixed on the ceiling, heart pounding with a rhythm that refused to calm. The past had walked into her present, tearing open wounds she thought had healed. Daniel's face, his voice, the look in his eyes when he saw the twins. It echoed in her mind like thunder. She got up, tiptoeing to the tiny kitchen, pouring herself a glass of water with shaking hands. Her reflection in the dark window stared back at her, eyes swollen, lips trembling. And then she heard it, a soft knock on the door. She didn't need to ask who it was. She opened it without a word. Daniel stood there under the weak porch light, holding his coat close to him like armor. "I had to see you again," he said. She didn't move. "You've seen enough. I need to talk to you." "About what? About the life you missed? About the children you abandoned?" His expression twisted with pain. "I didn't know, Hannah. I swear, if I had, you would have what?" She snapped, stepping outside, closing the door behind her so the boys wouldn't hear. "Stayed? Fought your mother? Given up the company? Don't lie to me, Daniel. We both know what mattered more to you." "I was scared," he whispered, "and selfish, and weak. But I never stopped thinking about you. That's not love. That's guilt." His shoulders sagged under the weight of her words. Rain began to fall, light, misty, but cold. "Why are you really here?" she asked, arms crossed tightly. "Why now? I found out about them yesterday. From my mother. She knew. She had you followed." Hannah's jaw clenched. "Of course she did. I couldn't believe it," he continued. "When I saw their faces, Hannah, they look just like me. And yet, they don't know who I am. No, they don't. And I won't let you confuse them. I'm not here to take them away. I just want a chance. To be their father. To earn it. Even if it takes years." Her eyes welled with tears, but she held them back with every ounce of strength she had left. "You lost that chance the day you walked away," she whispered. "And every day after that, when I cried alone, when they were sick and I had no one to hold them with me, when I had to choose between food and heating. Where were you then, Daniel?" His breath hitched. "I didn't know," he repeated, voice cracking. "But I know now, and I want to make it right." She shook her head slowly, bitter laughter escaping her lips. "You think it's that easy? You think you can just walk back into our lives like it's a boardroom negotiation?" "No," he said quietly. "But I can try." Silence hung between them. The rain grew stronger, soaking through their clothes, but neither moved. Finally, Hannah turned toward the door. "You should leave. Please," he begged. "Let me see them. Just once. Let me talk to them." She paused. Then, without looking back, she whispered, "Come tomorrow, after school. We'll talk." She went inside and locked the door behind her, pressing her back against it, sliding down to the floor as the tears she'd been holding for years finally fell. The next day, Daniel waited outside the school, watching the children run out in bursts of color and laughter. When he saw them, Minjun racing ahead, Haru walking with a book clutched to his chest, his heart clenched. They were so full of life, and none of it had come from him. He approached slowly, hands trembling. Minjun looked up and blinked. "You again," he said bluntly. Daniel smiled nervously. "Yeah, me again." Haru tilted his head. "Why are you always looking at us?" Daniel knelt down, meeting their eyes. "Because I think about you a lot." Minjun frowned. "Are you our mom's friend?" Daniel hesitated. Hannah appeared just then, placing a gentle hand on each boy's shoulder. "Let's go talk in the park," she said. They walked in silence, the boys skipping ahead toward the swings, unaware of the storm brewing between the adults behind them. Sitting on a bench, Hannah finally spoke. "You wanted to talk to them. Do it. But don't say you're their father. Not yet. They don't know what that means. They don't know what it feels like to be left." Daniel nodded slowly. His voice trembled as he watched them laugh together. "They're perfect. They're enough," she said. "Have they ever asked about me?" Hannah looked away. "Sometimes. I told them you were far away, that you weren't ready to be a father." He swallowed hard. "You were right. And are you ready now?" she asked, turning to him, eyes burning. "Because this isn't about guilt, Daniel. This isn't about easing your conscience. I'm ready to give them everything. They already have everything they need," she snapped. What they don't need is more heartbreak. Just then, Haru ran over, tugging at Hannah's hand. "Mom, can he push us on the swings?" She blinked. Daniel froze. She looked at Haru, then at Daniel. "Just once," she said softly. He stood, walking toward the swings as if they were sacred ground. As he placed his hands on the chains, Haru looked back at him. "You look like me," he said with a giggle. Daniel smiled through the tears. "Yeah, I guess I do." He pushed them gently, listening to their laughter echo across the empty park. For a fleeting moment, something inside him healed. But Hannah knew this wasn't the end. This was just the beginning of a storm, one she would not let take her children from her. Daniel started showing up at the preschool, not every day, but often enough that the teachers began to whisper. He would wait at the gates, sometimes bringing small toys or snacks, never pushing, just watching. Sometimes the boys ran to him, excited to show off a drawing or tell him about a new game. Other days, Minjun ignored him entirely, dragging Haru away with narrowed eyes and stiff shoulders. One afternoon, as the last of the children were picked up, Hannah lingered behind, wiping the blackboard in the empty classroom. She hadn't spoken to Daniel in days. Not since that strange, almost peaceful afternoon in the park. She thought maybe he'd given up. But as she walked out of the gate, there he was again, waiting. He wasn't in a suit today. Just jeans, a sweater, a paper bag in his hand. "Dinner," he said simply. "For you. I thought maybe you didn't have time to cook." She didn't take it. "I'm not hungry. I figured," he murmured, placing the bag down on the bench. "But the boys might be." She folded her arms. "What are you doing, Daniel?" He looked up at her, tired, his eyes softer than she remembered. "Trying. For what?" He didn't answer, and she didn't push. The silence stretched, the wind catching her loose hair, making her shiver. "You're making them confused," she said after a moment. "Minjun thinks you're just a nice man who likes kids. Haru keeps asking me if you'll be his teacher." He smiled faintly. "At least they're talking to me." "That's not the point," she snapped. "This, whatever this is, it's not just about showing up with food and toys. You don't know them. You don't know their lives." "I want to," he said quietly. She looked at him then, truly looked, and for a moment, the pain in her chest cracked open again. "You know what Haru does when he's nervous?" she asked. He hums to himself, little broken melodies under his breath. Minjun hides his drawings, says they're not good enough. They both hate thunder. They sleep in the same bed, even though they have separate ones, because they say it's warmer when they're together. Her voice wavered. "I know those things because I'm their mother. I held them when they were sick. I kissed their scraped knees. I stayed up all night when Haru had a fever and I didn't have enough money for medicine. I didn't run. I didn't leave." Daniel's breath caught. "I'm not asking for forgiveness, Hannah," he said, voice low. "I'm just asking for time, to prove I can be more than the man who left." A beat passed, then two. Finally, she picked up the paper bag. Not as an acceptance, not as trust, just hunger. "Don't expect this to mean anything," she said softly. "I won't." But it meant everything. That night, as she unpacked the bag and served the boys rice and bulgogi, they cheered like it was a holiday. She didn't tell them who brought it. They didn't ask. Still, she saw the way Haru smiled wider than usual. The way Minjun looked at the food, then glanced at her, as if he knew more than he said. The next day, Daniel came back again. This time, not with food or toys, but with a soccer ball. He waited outside the gate until Minjun spotted him. "You play soccer?" Daniel asked. Minjun shrugged. "Sometimes. I'm better than Haru." "I doubt that," Haru muttered, already tugging Daniel toward the park. And just like that, they played. For the first time, Daniel laughed without guilt. He chased after them, let Minjun score a goal, lifted Haru high into the air when he managed a clumsy kick. Hannah watched from a distance, arms crossed, emotions tangled in her throat. She wanted to scream, to pull the boys away, to protect them, but they were happy, and for the first time in years, she didn't feel quite so alone. Until she got the phone call. That evening, as she bathed the boys and folded laundry, her cell phone rang. She didn't recognize the number, but something about it made her stomach twist. "Hello." The voice was low, sharp, calculated. "You really thought you could hide forever?" Her heart stopped. "I beg your pardon? This is Mrs. Seo," the voice said, and Hannah's blood turned to ice. "Daniel's mother. I suggest you stop playing games. You've had your fun. Now disappear, while I'm still willing to keep this quiet." Hannah's hands began to tremble. "Stay away from my children," she hissed. "They're not your children," came the cold reply. "They're the heirs to a legacy. You had no right to keep them from us. If you think I'll let some gutter girl ruin everything my family built, I raised them, I fed them, I carried them when no one else would. You don't get to show up now and pretend they're yours to claim." "Daniel is weak," Mrs. Seo said, "but I'm not. If you don't walk away, I'll make sure you regret ever coming into his life. I have ways, Mississippi Park. You've seen what I'm capable of." The call ended. The room was spinning. The boys were laughing in the next room, water splashing. She leaned against the wall, breathing hard. She thought she was done with this part of her life. She thought she'd escaped. But the past didn't stay buried. It always found its way back. She hadn't told Daniel. Not yet. She didn't know if she wanted to. Would he protect her? Or would he crumble just like before? The twins were drawing at the back of the room. Their little heads bent close together as they whispered and giggled. Haru waved his arms suddenly, accidentally smudging his drawing, and Minjun burst out laughing. Just watching them made something ache deep inside her. An ache mixed with love, fear, and a growing sense of dread. After school, she packed their things quickly, glancing over her shoulder at every sound. She locked the classroom twice. Her hands shook on the keys. "Mom," Minjun said, tugging at her sleeve. "Why are you scared?" "I'm not," she lied. "You are," Haru whispered. "Your face looks like when you cried during that movie." She knelt beside them, brushing hair from their foreheads. "I just didn't sleep well, sweethearts. That's all." She didn't know how to protect them from a threat they couldn't see. Later that evening, after they'd fallen asleep in front of a cartoon marathon, she stepped outside, arms wrapped tight against the cold, and dialed Daniel's number with trembling fingers. He picked up on the second ring. "Hannah, can we talk?" He was there in 15 minutes. She met him outside the apartment, her voice low and tight. "Your mother called me." His entire expression changed. "What?" "She knows everything. About me. About the boys. She threatened me, Daniel. She said I should disappear before she makes me regret ever being part of your life." He clenched his jaw, stepping back like he'd been punched. "She told me she didn't know," he whispered. "Well, she knows now," Hannah said, arms crossed, trying to steady her breathing. "And she's not going to stop. You know what she's like. I'll handle it." Hannah gave a bitter laugh. "Like you handled it before?" His eyes flickered. "She can't control me anymore," he said. "She's holding on to a world that's fading. I've already made my decision." "And what decision is that?" He looked at her, eyes filled with something raw. "That I want to be in their lives, no matter what it costs me." She shook her head. "Daniel, this isn't just about you anymore. She's dangerous. You think she'll sit back and watch while her perfect son plays house with the woman she tried to erase from his life?" "I'll take her on," he said fiercely. "I'm not afraid of her." "You should be," she said quietly. "She has power, money, connections." He stepped closer, voice low and urgent. "Then I'll give all of it up. The company, the title, all of it. I'll walk away if that's what it takes." Her breath caught. For a moment she believed him, but then the doubt returned, thick, familiar. "You say that now," she whispered. "But when she turns the board against you, when the media comes knocking, when your life starts falling apart, will you still choose us then?" He didn't answer. The silence stretched. She backed away. "I can't let them get hurt," she said. "Not again. I would never hurt them." "You already did," she said, voice breaking. "You just didn't see it." She turned to go inside, but his voice stopped her. "I want to tell them," he said. "I want them to know who I am." She froze. "No, they deserve to know. Not like this. Not in the middle of chaos. They'll find out eventually. Then let it be on my terms," she said sharply. "When they're ready. When they're safe." Daniel's shoulders sagged. "I love them," he said. She looked over her shoulder, her eyes glassy. "Then protect them," she whispered, "even if it means staying away." The door closed between them. Inside, the boys were still on the floor, half asleep, the TV casting flickering light across their faces. Daniel stood outside in the rain for a long time, not moving, until the lights went out and the window went dark. The next day, everything changed. At the company headquarters, tension had been building like pressure behind glass. Rumors flew like wasps. Something about internal audits, suspicious numbers, overseas transfers. Daniel was summoned to the board. The room was quiet, the air too still. His uncle sat at the head of the table, an older man with a cruel smile. "There's been a development," he said. "It seems your financial division has uncovered irregularities. Under your oversight." Daniel stiffened. "What kind of irregularities?" "Fraudulent accounts, discrepancies in shareholder returns. Several international partners have pulled out. I never authorized anything like that." "Then you're either incompetent," his uncle said smoothly, "or you've been outplayed." Daniel turned sharply toward his mother, seated calmly in the corner, her hands folded, expression unreadable. "You did this," he said. Her lips curved faintly. "You turned your back on everything I built. Did you think I'd let you tear it all down for some village girl and 2 illegitimate brats? You're destroying your own son." "No," she said coolly. "I'm saving the company from him." Daniel stood, heart racing. "You'll regret this." "I already do," she said. "From the moment you chose her." That evening, the news broke. Scandal in CO Corporation. CEO under fire for financial misconduct. Daniel's name was splashed across every screen, every news feed. Commentators debated his downfall. Former allies vanished overnight. He was suspended, isolated, and suddenly alone. He walked the city streets that night with no driver, no assistant, no protection. Just his coat and the stares of strangers. He ended up in front of the preschool, long after it had closed, staring at the place where his boys laughed and played. And when his phone rang, it wasn't a lawyer or a board member. It was Hannah. "You need to stop coming here," she said. "The paparazzi are already sniffing around. People are talking." "I lost everything." Her breath caught. "What?" "My mother, the company, my name. It's all gone." There was a long pause. Then, "So now what?" "I don't know," he whispered. "You always had everything," she said. "And I always had nothing. And yet somehow, I was the one who kept going." He closed his eyes. "I don't want to disappear." "Then don't," she said softly. "But if you stay, you do it as a man, not a tycoon. No more suits. No more power. No more safety nets." He looked up at the sky, at the stars that had finally pierced through the clouds. "I'm ready." She didn't answer, not with words. But when she opened the door later that night and found him sleeping on the steps, soaked and shivering, she placed a blanket over his shoulders. He hadn't meant to fall asleep there, but something about the silence had held him still, like a fragile thread tethering him to a place he was terrified of losing again. When the door opened, Hannah stood there in a long cardigan, her eyes tired, but not surprised. "You're still here." He looked up at her, blinking sleep from his eyes. "I didn't know where else to go." She stepped aside without a word, letting him in. Inside, the apartment smelled of boiled rice and something faintly floral. The boys were still asleep on the futon, curled together like they always were, Minjun's hand resting protectively on Haru's back. Daniel stared at them, a lump caught in his throat. "They sleep like that every night?" he whispered. "Since they were babies," she replied. Minjun always said Haru got scared when he slept alone. He crouched down slowly, brushing a piece of hair from Haru's cheek. The boy stirred but didn't wake. "They're beautiful," he murmured. "They're resilient," she corrected gently. "There's a difference." She walked to the kitchen, busying herself with pouring tea, her hands moving on instinct, even as her heart raced. She hadn't planned for this. Not for him being there in the morning. Not for the chaos that followed him now like a shadow. He sat quietly at the table, watching her. "Have you decided what you're going to do?" she asked after a moment, sliding a cup toward him. "I don't have many options," he said. "The boards locked me out. My bank accounts are frozen until the audit ends. My mother has rallied almost everyone against me. And the media?" He nodded. "They've started circling. Rumors are flying about fraud, about the engagement, about you." Her hands clenched around the ceramic cup. "She wants to destroy me, and she's not going to stop with me," he continued. "If she finds a way to drag you through the mud." "She already has." Hannah cut in. "There were reporters outside the school yesterday." Daniel's jaw tightened. "I'm sorry." "Don't say sorry," she said, staring down at the tea. "Just mean what you do next." A long silence settled between them. "I'm going to fight back," he said at last. "But not for the company. Not for my name. For them. For you." She looked at him, 1,000 unsaid things swirling behind her eyes. "You don't know how to live like this, Daniel," she said softly. "Without the suits, the cars, the influence. You've never been ordinary. I want to learn. And if you can't, then I'll fail. But I won't stop trying." A soft cry broke the moment. Haru sat up on the futon, rubbing his eyes, blinking sleepily. "Mom," he mumbled. "I'm here, baby." His eyes drifted to Daniel, confused. "Why's he here again?" Daniel stood, heart pounding. "Because I want to be." Minjun stirred next, his voice groggy. "He slept on the floor?" Daniel gave a small smile. "The stairs, actually." Minjun looked at Hannah, then at Daniel. "Are you in trouble?" He knelt before them both. "Yeah, I am. A lot of it." "Did you do something bad?" Minjun asked. Daniel hesitated. "Yes, a long time ago, and now I'm trying to fix it." Haru tilted his head. "Did you lie?" "Yes," Daniel said quietly. "And I left someone who loved me." Minjun frowned. "That's not good." "I know," Daniel said, eyes filling. "But I want to do better." The boys exchanged a look only brothers could understand. Then Haru stood up and walked toward Daniel, wrapping his arms around his neck. "You can sit with us," he said, "just for today." Daniel's breath hitched. Hannah turned away quickly, blinking back tears she didn't want them to see. Later that morning, Daniel joined them at the breakfast table. Awkwardly, quietly, like a man walking on sacred ground. He poured juice, passed rice, listened as the boys talked about cartoons and playground races. He didn't try to talk over them or insert himself. He just listened. And when it was time to walk to school, he offered to carry their backpacks. They let him, but as they disappeared down the street, hand in hand, Hannah stood by the door, her mind heavy. She knew her peace was temporary, that behind every smile, a storm still brewed. And by midday, that storm arrived. A black sedan pulled up outside the school. A man in a tailored suit stepped out, flashing a badge. "Hannah Park." She nodded slowly, her instincts screaming. "I'm here on behalf of the CO Family Trust. We've been instructed to serve you with a formal petition regarding guardianship concerns for Minjun and Haru CO." Her blood froze. "I'm sorry, what?" He handed her a thick envelope. "You've been accused of concealing the identities of the heirs to the CO estate and obstructing their rightful inheritance. There will be a hearing within 10 days. You have no right," she breathed, hands trembling. "Ma'am, this comes directly from Mrs. CO." He turned and walked away without another word. She clutched the papers to her chest, her heart racing. The world was no longer knocking. It was breaking the door down. The boys were at school. The silence in the apartment was suffocating. When the door opened and Daniel stepped in, cheeks flushed from the cold, His smile faded the moment he saw her. "What happened?" he asked, rushing to her side. She didn't speak. She just held out the envelope with a trembling hand. He knelt down slowly, took it, opened it, and read. Word by word, line by line, his expression darkened, and his breathing grew shallow. "They're trying to take them," Hannah said, her voice hollow. "Your mother filed for custody. She's using your name, your family's name, their money, everything." "She can't do that," he growled. "She can," Hannah snapped, suddenly rising to her feet. "You don't understand how powerful she is, Daniel. She's not just making threats anymore. She's making moves. I'll go to the lawyers. I'll fight this." "With what?" she barked. "You've lost your position. Your assets are frozen. You're not even legally listed as their father yet. Do you think a judge is going to side with us when your own family is dragging you through the mud?" Daniel stood too, jaw clenched, fists tight. "Then we prove she's unfit. We show them who she really is. And what? Dig up every skeleton in her closet? She'll burn everything to the ground before she lets that happen." "We don't have a choice," he said, quieter now. "She's forcing this." Hannah turned her back to him, trying to keep her breathing even. "I kept them safe for 7 years. 7 years. I didn't ask for anything. And now they want to strip them away like they're trophies." Daniel stepped toward her, voice low. "I won't let them." She turned to face him, eyes shining with fury and pain. "Then tell me, are you ready to go to war with your own mother?" "Yes," he said without hesitation. "No," Hannah said, shaking her head. "Don't say it unless you mean it. Because if you start this and you break again, if you give up halfway through like you did before, I won't." "You can't afford to," she whispered, "because I don't have anything left to protect them with except my will. And even that's wearing thin." He stepped closer and took her hand. "Then I'll lend you mine." She looked at him, truly looked at him, and for a moment she saw not the tycoon, not the man who had once walked away, but someone stripped bare. Someone afraid and furious and aching, just like her. They were no longer the people they used to be. That night, Daniel called his last few allies, those who hadn't turned their backs yet. He met with an independent lawyer, a woman with sharp eyes and a voice like steel. Hannah watched from the kitchen as they spoke in hushed tones. Documents spread across the table. "Shared custody isn't even the issue," the lawyer said. "Right now, Mrs. Co is arguing that Hannah is unfit and that you, Daniel, are financially unstable and mentally compromised due to your recent loss of power." "Mentally compromised?" Daniel muttered. "She's building a case that you've been manipulated, emotionally unstable since your fall from grace. And the boys? She wants them under the care of the CO estate, private schools, governesses, total control." Hannah felt the bile rise in her throat. "She wants to erase me." The lawyer nodded solemnly. "She's not just trying to win. She's trying to destroy." Daniel leaned forward. "So how do we fight this?" "Expose her," the lawyer said. "Find proof of her coercion, her manipulation. Show that this is about pride and control, not the children's well-being." "I know where to start," Daniel said darkly. "She's made a career of covering her tracks, but she's slipped before. Then we need names, people, anything she's paid off or silenced. We need to move fast." As the lawyer gathered her things, Hannah followed her to the door. "Do I have a chance?" she asked softly. The lawyer hesitated. "You're the boy's mother. You've raised them alone. That matters. But this fight won't be fair. It won't be clean." "I don't need fair," Hannah said. "I just need to win." When the door shut, she leaned against it, exhausted. Daniel watched her for a long moment before saying, "We'll get through this." She looked at him, bitterly amused. "You say that like we're not already broken." "Maybe we are," he admitted. "But sometimes the broken parts are the ones that hold strongest." She wanted to believe that, desperately. But the next morning, her belief was tested again. Minjun came home from school. Quiet, too quiet. Haru trailed behind him, holding his brother's hand tightly. "Minjun," Hannah asked gently, What's wrong? The boy looked at her, eyes wide and shaken. A man came to school today. He asked questions. Hannah crouched beside him, heart pounding. What kind of questions? He said he knew our grandma. He asked if you yelled at us, if we were scared of you. Haru's lower lip quivered. He had a camera. Hannah's vision blurred. No, she whispered. No, no. Daniel was already on his feet, grabbing his phone, his voice shaking. I'll find out who it was. I'll stop it. But Hannah didn't hear him. All she could hear was the sound of her children's innocence cracking. Tiny splinters falling into her hands. They were under attack. Not just her. Not just Daniel. The boys. And now she realized it was no longer about survival. It was about reclaiming their peace. Minjun and Haru sat curled on the couch under a blanket. Both boys unusually quiet, their cartoon forgotten on the screen. Hannah knelt beside them, brushing their hair back, murmuring soft reassurances, even though her voice trembled with every word. They won't come back, okay? She whispered. You're safe here. Minjun stared at his knees. He said if I lied, you'd go to jail. Hannah's breath caught. What? She whispered. He said we should always tell the truth. But then he smiled like he wanted me to say something bad. I didn't lie, Mom, Haru added, his voice shaking. But I didn't know what to say. Hannah wrapped her arms around them both, tears slipping silently down her cheeks. You did perfect, baby. Both of you. When Daniel came back that night, soaked from running through half the city chasing legal contacts and private investigators, he looked more haunted than ever. They're escalating, he said, pulling off his wet jacket. That man was hired by a private child welfare monitor, paid by a third-party law office. Guess who's behind it? She's trying to prove I'm unfit, Hannah said quietly. Daniel nodded, pressing his palms against the edge of the kitchen table. They're manipulating everything, twisting interviews, planting false witness statements. How do you know? I spoke to someone, he said, voice low. Someone who used to work for my mother's legal team. Hannah narrowed her eyes. And she's done this before, years ago, to another woman who tried to fight her for custody of a child she didn't approve of. That woman lost everything, even her visitation rights. Did the father help her? Hannah asked. Daniel looked away. Exactly, Hannah muttered, pulling her sweater tighter around her shoulders. You still think you can protect us? I will protect you, he said firmly. But I need you to trust me. She turned sharply to face him. Trust isn't given, Daniel. It's earned. And everything we've done so far has been defense. I'm not waiting anymore. I'm not watching these boys get torn apart so you can tiptoe around your guilt. His voice rose. You think I'm tiptoeing? I know you are, she hissed. You haven't stepped into that courtroom, you haven't stood in front of your mother, and you haven't told the world the truth about us. Because deep down, you still care what they think. You still want to be the son she approves of, no matter how much you hate her. That's not fair, he said, eyes blazing. No, she said, calmer now, pain in every word. What's not fair is them asking if they should lie about their own mother to keep me out of jail. Silence. He couldn't look at her. A long breath passed between them. Then he said softly, She's holding my father's will hostage. Hannah blinked. What? She said if I don't stop seeing you, she'll release a forged version of it, removing me as heir entirely. That's what she's been blackmailing me with since day one. Why does that matter? Hannah whispered, confused. You said you didn't care about the inheritance. I don't, he said quickly, but the real will, the one my father signed before he died, it names the twins. She stared at him, stunned. She's hiding it? She's terrified of it, he replied. Because if it comes out, not only will the boys have legal claims to the estate, but she'll lose everything. The company, her seat on the board, her influence. Oh my God, Hannah whispered. So all this, the custody, the press, it's all about keeping them from being CO children. She wants them erased. And you didn't tell me this, why? She asked, furious. Because I didn't want to risk making you a bigger target, he said. Because if I exposed this without evidence, she would have crushed you. And now I have someone on the inside, he said. A former assistant of hers. She kept copies of emails, meeting notes, the original draft of the will. Hannah stared at him. Can it save us? Daniel's eyes darkened. It might save everything. She nodded, slowly, her chest rising and falling with every breath. Then do it, she said. He hesitated. It could mean a public trial. Headlines. More cameras. The boys could be exposed. She walked past him, into the hallway where Minjun and Haru were asleep again, tangled together on the couch. She looked at their tiny faces, the soft rise and fall of their chests. Then teach them to stand, she whispered. The next morning, Daniel showed up at his mother's estate for the first time in weeks. The marble foyer was just as cold as he remembered. The paintings still hung with silent pride. But this time, he didn't look up at them. He walked straight to the dining room where his mother was sipping tea, reading a newspaper. You shouldn't be here, she said, barely glancing up. I'm here to give you a choice, he said. She slowly put the cup down, her smile faint. Oh, is that so? You withdraw the petition. You leave Hannah and the boys alone. Or I go public with everything. Her brow arched. And what do you have? Enough, he said. Enough to bring down your reputation, your career, and the company. Enough to prove that my father's will was altered. I have names, documents, people who were there. She didn't move. Her smile didn't waver. I always knew love made men stupid, she said calmly. But I didn't realize it made them suicidal. I'm not afraid of you anymore. She stood then, walked toward him slowly. You'll lose everything, Daniel. Your name, your protection. You'll be reduced to nothing. He met her gaze. Then I'll build something new with them. Your children are nothing but leverage, she hissed. They are not CEOs. They're stains. Daniel's voice didn't shake. They're my sons. And if you ever call them that again, I'll burn your legacy to the ground. She slapped him. The sound echoed through the house. But he didn't flinch. He looked her in the eyes, steady and unwavering, and said, I choose them. Now, forever. Try to stop me. And with that, he turned and walked away. The storm had arrived. But this time, he wasn't running from it. She hated hospitals. Every inch of them smelled like fear, like the echo of lives hanging by threads. She hadn't told Daniel where she was going. She didn't want him to see her like this. Not yet. She looked up as the door creaked open. It was the doctor, late 30s, kind eyes, a clipboard in his hand that looked heavier than it should have. Mississippi Park, he said gently. Thank you for coming back in. I didn't have a choice, she whispered. You said my blood work was abnormal. He nodded, stepping inside and closing the door behind him. We ran it twice just to be sure. Then we followed up with scans. Her fingers gripped the thin blanket beneath her. I'm afraid the results show signs of a chronic autoimmune condition. It's advanced, and it's affecting more than we'd like. She blinked, as if trying to understand a language that wasn't hers. What does that mean? It means your body is fighting itself, and it's not winning. He stepped closer, lowering his voice. We believe it's systemic lupus erythematosus. It's been progressing quietly for years, likely masked by stress and fatigue. But now it's starting to attack your organs, specifically your kidneys and your heart. The walls seem to narrow around her. Is it fatal? If left untreated, yes, he said softly. Even with treatment, there are risks. Flare-ups, organ damage. You'll need medication, monitoring, possibly surgery if complications arise. She covered her mouth with a shaking hand. You have children, don't you? The doctor asked. She nodded, unable to speak. Then you need to fight this. For them. She stared ahead blankly, eyes filling with tears that wouldn't fall. Later that night, Hannah stood at the window of the apartment, staring out at the lights of the city, her hands wrapped around a mug she hadn't touched. Behind her, Daniel was helping the boys with their pajamas, humming some silly tune Haru had taught him. He glanced at her as he passed the hallway. "Hannah?" he asked gently. "You okay?" She nodded. But he knew her too well now. When the boys were finally asleep, he found her in the kitchen, the mug untouched, her shoulders trembling. He stepped closer, slowly. "Hannah? I went to the hospital today," she said before he could speak. His breath caught. "Why? What happened?" "I've been dizzy, tired. Sometimes I can't feel my hands. I thought it was stress. Just stress." His hand reached out, hovering before it gently settled on hers. "What did they say?" She didn't look at him. "I'm sick, Daniel." His grip tightened slightly. "Sick how?" She finally turned to face him. Her eyes were red, but her face was steady. "Lupus is attacking my heart." For a moment, the only sound in the room was the ticking of the clock above the sink. Then Daniel took a step back, as if his body couldn't absorb the blow fast enough. "No," he whispered. "It's not cancer," she added, as if that made it easier. "But it's chronic. I'll be sick forever. I might get worse." He shook his head, dazed. "But you didn't say anything." "I didn't want to, not until I knew for sure." He rubbed his face with both hands, pacing the small kitchen, breathing fast. Can it be treated? Are there surgeries? Medications?" "Yes, but nothing's guaranteed." She looked down. "I don't know how much time I have before it gets worse." He froze, then slowly walked to her. "Hannah," he said softly. "Look at me." She didn't, so he gently lifted her chin with 2 fingers. "I'm not leaving." Her lips trembled. "That's not what I'm afraid of." "Then what?" "That the boys will watch me fade away." Daniel's face broke. "Then I'll hold them. I'll carry them through it." "I'll carry you through it, Hannah." She let out a shaky breath, closing her eyes. "I don't want pity. This isn't pity. This is love." A tear finally fell, silent and slow. "I didn't plan for this," she said. "No one does," he whispered. "But we get to decide what we do with it." She collapsed into his arms, the first time she had let herself fall completely since the day he walked away. He held her tightly, burying his face in her hair, breathing her in like she was the only thing keeping him upright. They stood there, in the tiny kitchen, wrapped in grief and hope and the silence that comes after a storm has cracked the sky. And upstairs, 2 little boys dreamed of robots and heroes. The pain came in waves, first in her joints, then in her chest. Sometimes it was a dull ache. Other times it felt like her heart was squeezing itself, begging her to rest. But rest was a luxury she couldn't afford. Not when the custody hearing was approaching. Not when reporters were still circling. Not when her sons needed her smile to feel safe. She'd become an expert at hiding the worst of it. Except from Daniel. He saw everything. He saw it in the way her hands shook when she poured tea, in how she winced while kneeling to tie Haru's shoes. He saw it in the quiet, sleepless nights when she'd sit beside the boys' bed, watching them as if afraid they might vanish. He never said anything. He just stayed. On a Saturday morning, the 4 of them went to the park, an unspoken attempt to feel normal. Minjun was chasing a paper kite Daniel had helped him make, while Haru collected rocks and leaves, showing them proudly to his mother. Hannah sat on a bench, wrapped in a thick scarf, her smile soft but distant. The wind had a chill to it, and her skin looked paler than usual. Daniel walked over, placing a cup of warm tea in her hands. "You shouldn't be out here in the cold," he said gently. "I need them to remember me like this," she replied without hesitation, laughing, watching them play. He crouched beside her, eyes searching hers. "Don't talk like you're leaving." "I'm not," she said with a quiet smile. "But if it happens, I want them to remember days like this. Not hospitals, not tubes and wires. You're not alone, Hannah." She nodded, eyes on the kite now dancing in the wind. "That's what scares me." He looked at her, confused. "Why?" "Because love makes things harder, not easier," she whispered. "If I didn't have you now, I could slip away quietly. But with you here, with them, I want too much. I want more time. Daniel took her hand gently. Then want it, he said, and I'll fight for every second of it with you. That night, while the boys slept, Hannah took a deep breath and pulled out a box from the top shelf of the closet. Daniel watched as she placed it on the table. What is it? He asked. My will, she said quietly. And letters. For the boys. His chest tightened. No, Hannah. Please, she interrupted, voice firm. I'm not giving up, but I need to be ready. He sat across from her, his heart pounding in his throat. She opened the box. Inside were envelopes, each labeled in her delicate handwriting. To Minjun on his 10th birthday, to Haru when he's afraid, to both of you, when you miss me. I started writing these when they were babies, she said, tracing the edges of the paper. Whenever I was scared, I added more when I got sick. Daniel looked away, blinking back tears. I want you to give them these when the time is right, she said. No, he said, his voice breaking. You will give them yourself. She reached across the table and touched his hand. I hope so. They sat in silence, the weight of the unknown pressing into the space between them. Then softly, Hannah asked, Daniel, if something happens to me before the court hearing, don't, he whispered. Don't even. Promise me, she said firmly. Promise you'll fight for them. I will. And if they try to take them, if your mother tries to twist everything, promise me you'll keep them safe, not as heirs, not as assets, as our sons. He looked at her, his entire being trembling. I promise, he whispered. She smiled through the tears. Then I can breathe a little easier. A few days later, Hannah collapsed. It was during a parent-teacher meeting. She had stood up too quickly, and the room spun. The walls caved in, her vision went black, and she hit the floor with a soft thud, her body crumpling in front of a crowd of stunned teachers and parents. By the time Daniel arrived at the hospital, her eyes were open, but distant. She's stable, the nurse said, but her heart's under stress. She needs rest, immediate rest. Daniel sat beside her bed, holding her hand as machines beeped steadily around them. You scared me, he whispered. I scared myself, she murmured. You can't keep pushing like this. I don't know how to stop. He leaned closer, pressing his forehead against hers. Then let me carry it for a while. She smiled faintly. You already are. The doctor returned with test results. Her condition's worsening, he said. If we don't get her on a new treatment plan soon, we're looking at possible cardiac damage. She needs more than medication now. She needs to be away from stress. Completely. Daniel looked at him. What kind of treatment? There's a clinic in Busan, the doctor said, specialized in autoimmune therapy. Quiet, private. It's the best chance she has of stabilizing. Daniel turned to Hannah. She was already shaking her head. I can't leave. The hearing's in 2 weeks. If you stay here, the doctor said gently, you may not make it to the hearing. Hannah looked at Daniel, eyes full of tears. I can't go, she said. Not without the boys. Daniel gripped her hand tightly. Then we go together. But I'll handle everything, he promised. You focus on getting better. She looked at him, truly looked, and for the first time in years, she let go. I'm scared, she whispered. So am I, he said. But I'd rather be scared with you than strong without you. And as the city lights blinked in the distance, Hannah fell asleep. Her hand still in his. Daniel stood near the platform, 2 small suitcases by his side and a backpack slung over his shoulder. His eyes scanned the station entrance every few seconds, restless, as if making sure this moment was real. Haru clung to his hand, rubbing his sleepy eyes. Minjun sat nearby on a bench, quietly flipping through a comic book, his brows furrowed in thought. And then Hannah appeared, wheelchair-bound, bundled in a long coat, a scarf wrapped around her neck, and a medical bag resting on her lap. Her face was pale, but her eyes, they were awake, alert, fighting. The nurse beside her gently pushed the wheelchair forward. Daniel rushed over. "You okay?" he asked softly. "I'm still breathing," she said, managing a tired smile. He crouched down, brushing hair from her cheek. "We'll be at the clinic in a few hours. They're expecting us." She nodded slowly, eyes shifting to the boys. "Are they okay with this?" "They think it's a little vacation," he whispered. "I didn't tell them the whole truth. I don't want them to be afraid." "They're not," he said. "They're just worried about you." She turned to Minjun as he approached, hesitant. He stood in front of her, his comic book now forgotten in his hand. "Mom," he said softly, "will you get better?" She reached for his hand, her fingers trembling. "I'm going to try really hard, baby. And we'll be with you, right? Every step of the way." Minjun looked over at Haru, who smiled and nodded. "Then that's enough," Minjun whispered. Hannah's eyes welled up, and she pulled both boys into her arms, her voice catching as she whispered, "You make me brave." The train ride to Busan was quiet. The boys stared out the window in wonder at the shifting landscapes. Hannah slept most of the way, her head resting gently against Daniel's shoulder. He watched her breathe, watched the way her chest rose and fell in rhythm with the train's hum. At the clinic, everything was calm. White walls, soft lighting, warm voices. Felt safe, secluded, like time moved slower here. Over the next few days, Hannah began treatment. She was placed under observation, started on aggressive but promising therapy. There were IVs, daily tests, a low-sodium diet. There were setbacks too. Fevers, fatigue, tears in the middle of the night when her body didn't respond the way it should. But she was never alone. Daniel was always there, reading beside her bed, holding her hand during injections, helping her walk even when her legs felt like fire. And the boys, they filled the room with laughter, with stories, with wild dreams about robots and dinosaurs and saving the world. Hannah called them her little sons. One evening, after the nurse dimmed the lights and the boys had fallen asleep in the corner of the room with books sprawled around them, Hannah turned to Daniel. "I never imagined this," she said quietly. This peace," she said. "Even with the pain, even with everything we've lost. This moment, right now, feels like something I didn't think I'd get back." He looked at her, touched her hand. "You deserve it. I don't know what's going to happen when we go back. We'll face it. Together. Always." She took a long breath. "Do you ever think about the life we could have had?" "Every day," he said. "But if we hadn't gone through everything we did, I wouldn't know how much I needed you, how much they needed you. I think I had to lose everything to realize what really mattered." She squeezed his hand. Outside, the wind picked up again, rustling the trees beyond the clinic's courtyard. Hannah stared out the window, her voice soft. "I've been dreaming a lot," she said. "Strange dreams." "Like what?" "Like standing on a cliff, and the sea is below me, roaring. And I keep thinking if I jump, maybe it won't hurt. Maybe I'll fly." Daniel's eyes darkened. "I don't want you to jump." She turned to him. "You're the only reason I haven't." He reached out, gently brushing a tear from her cheek. "Then let me be your anchor." "I'm scared." "So am I," he whispered. "But I'd rather be scared holding your hand than fearless alone." The next morning, the doctors came with news. Her vitals had improved. Slightly. Her body was responding to the medication. It was too early to call it a victory, but it was a sign, a chance. When Daniel told the boys, Haru threw his arms in the air. "See, I told you Mom was stronger than the bad cells." Minjun smiled, but his voice was quieter. "That means we get to go home soon, right?" Daniel hesitated. "We'll see, buddy." Later that night, when Hannah was resting and the boys were asleep again, Daniel stepped outside into the courtyard. The air was crisp, and the stars hung low and bright above the mountains. He took out his phone, dialed. His lawyer picked up. "Daniel, I have a plan," he said, "and I need you to help me make it happen. We can't wait for the hearing. I want to go public, with everything." "You're sure?" "She tried to take my children. She almost killed the woman I love. I'm done hiding. There's no going back from this. I know. He ended the call and stared at the sky. And for the first time in years, he didn't feel like he was falling. My name is Daniel Seo, he said, and I've come today not to defend myself, but to tell the truth. The broadcast was picked up across the country, and within hours the headlines shifted. Former TYcoon speaks out. Claims of forgery, blackmail, and the fight for his children. At the clinic, Hannah sat frozen on the couch in her room, the boys asleep behind her. The television glowed softly as Daniel's voice filled the space between her ribs like a tremor. She tried to erase them, he said. My sons, my partner, the woman I abandoned years ago, thinking I was doing the right thing. I wasn't. I was weak. I let power guide me, and I hurt the only people who ever loved me for who I was, not what I owned. Hannah pressed her hand to her chest. I'm not asking for sympathy, Daniel continued. I'm asking for justice. For a mother who raised 2 children on her own while I disappeared into boardrooms in silence. For the right to love my sons without fear. For the right for them to know their worth outside of a last name or inheritance. The camera zoomed in slightly as he looked straight into the lens. And to my mother, this ends now. Release the will. Drop the custody petition. Or face what you built coming undone from the inside. The screen faded to black. Silence. And then Hannah exhaled, slow, shaking, like her soul had been holding its breath for years. When Daniel returned to the clinic that night, she was waiting for him by the window. You did it, she whispered. He looked tired, but there was something new in his eyes. Something solid. I had to. You just painted a target on your back. I know. He stepped closer. But if anything happens to me, they'll know who to blame. And the world's watching now. She can't hide behind lawyers and reputation anymore. I never thought you'd have the courage. Neither did I, he said honestly. But you gave it to me. She reached for his hand and pulled him gently to sit beside her. What happens next? She asked. We wait, he said, and we fight. The call came the next day. Daniel answered on speakerphone while Hannah sat beside him, her hand in his. The lawyer's voice was tight with disbelief. She's dropped the petition. What? Hannah whispered. She folded. No press statement, no press conference. Just a formal letter. She's withdrawing all claims of custody and backing away from the estate's legal control. I don't know how you did it, Daniel, but it's over. Daniel leaned back against the wall, his mouth slightly open. And the will? He asked. It's been verified. The original. Your father named your sons as rightful heirs to his personal holdings. Not the company, but the inheritance meant for family. You were always meant to protect them. Tears welled in Hannah's eyes. Are we safe now? She asked. The lawyer paused. Legally? Yes. But power like hers doesn't disappear. She'll still be watching, still waiting. But if she moves again, it'll be in the light. She knows the world is watching now. When the call ended, Hannah leaned into Daniel's chest and let herself sob. Quiet, exhausted, relief-filled sobs that shook her whole body. I didn't think we'd make it, she whispered. We almost didn't, but we're still here. He kissed the top of her head. And we're going to stay here. Later that afternoon, Hannah stood in front of the mirror, brushing her hair with slow, steady strokes. The room was quiet. Outside, the sun was just beginning to dip into the mountains, casting everything in golden light. Daniel stepped into the doorway. The boys are asking if they can go to the beach, he said. She smiled. Let's go, then. They walked together, the 4 of them, down a quiet path to the sea. The air was cool but gentle. The water sparkled in the late sun. Minjun ran ahead with a stick, shouting about pirates. Haru skipped beside him, careful not to fall. Hannah stood at the shoreline, her feet buried in the sand, the waves kissing her toes. Daniel stood beside her, watching the horizon. Do you still dream about jumping? He asked. She looked at him, the light dancing in her eyes. Sometimes. He nodded. Me too. She took a deep breath and said, But now, I dream about staying. He turned to her, his voice thick with emotion. So do I. They stood there, side by side, two broken souls stitched back together by time, pain, and love, watching their sons run free, their laughter carried by the wind. Hannah lay in her hospital bed, thinner than she had been weeks ago, her skin translucent in the moonlight, but her eyes were awake, alive with something deeper than pain. Daniel sat beside her, holding her hand, his thumb tracing slow circles over her knuckles. He hadn't said much all evening. He didn't have to. His silence was loud with love. "I feel it," she said suddenly, her voice barely above a breath. He looked at her, startled. "Feel what?" "The end coming." He stiffened. "Don't." She turned her head slowly toward him. "You don't have to be afraid of it." "I'm not afraid of it," he whispered. "I'm afraid of a world without you in it." She smiled gently, her eyes soft. "You'll still see me everywhere." In the way Minjun scrunches his nose when he's thinking. In how Haru hugs without warning. In their laughter, their stubbornness. "I'm in them, Daniel." He leaned closer, his forehead resting against hers. "They're not ready." "Neither were we," she said with a weak laugh. "But we figured it out." Tears slid down his cheeks, one by one, quietly. She brushed one away with trembling fingers. "Promise me something. Anything. When they ask where I went, don't tell them I disappeared." He pulled back, looking into her eyes. "Then what should I say?" "Tell them I went to find the stars," she whispered. "Tell them I'll be watching every night, waiting for their stories." Daniel nodded, struggling to breathe. "And when they cry, let them. When they break, you hold them," she whispered, "like you held me." A long silence followed, until Hannah looked up toward the ceiling, her voice now far away. "Do you remember the first time we sat under the rain?" He smiled through his grief. "I remember everything. You said I made you feel like someone worth knowing. You made me someone worth being," he replied. Her breathing slowed, deep and steady. "I'm not scared," she said again, her voice softer, fading. "I'm just tired." "I know," he whispered. "You can rest now." She turned her head to the side, her fingers still interlaced with his. "Tell them I love them. I will. Every day. Every moment." Her lips curled slightly, and for a fleeting second, she looked like the Hannah he met all those years ago. Bright-eyed, full of fire, full of fight. Then, the breath left her, quietly, gently, like a candle extinguished by the breeze. Daniel didn't move. He sat there, holding her hand long after the machines had stilled, long after the nurse quietly stepped in, eyes glassy, and confirmed what he already knew. He kissed her forehead, tears soaking her hair. "Thank you," he whispered, "for choosing me, for giving me them, for everything." The boys woke the next morning to find their father sitting between their beds, holding their mother's letters. He didn't lie to them. He didn't hide it. He just knelt on the floor, gathered them into his arms, and told them, "She went to find the stars." Minjun buried his face in his chest. Haru cried without sound, holding tightly to the edges of Daniel's shirt. And the three of them stayed like that, wrapped in silence and grief and love. Outside, the waves kept crashing. It had been 3 days. 3 days since the world shifted in Daniel's chest and left a hollow that no breath could fill. He hadn't left the boys' side since. He watched them sleep, eat, cry. He brushed their hair and folded their socks, and in the quietest hours of the night, he opened her letters, one by one, his hands shaking each time. There was one for him too. He hadn't opened it. Not yet. This morning, he sat on the edge of a quiet hill behind the clinic, overlooking the ocean. The boys were down the path with a nurse, chasing dragonflies, unaware of the weight still tightening around his heart. He pulled the envelope from his coat pocket. To Daniel, when the silence feels too loud. He ran his thumb over the handwriting. Every letter of his name curled with familiarity, tenderness, the way only she had written it. His fingers broke the seal, and he read, "Daniel, if you're reading this, it means I'm no longer next to you. And I hate that. I hate that I couldn't give you more days, more laughter, more chances to make up for the years we lost. But love isn't measured by time, is it? It's measured by how deeply it roots inside you, how fiercely it survives the storms. And you loved me back when it would have been easier to forget. Thank you. I need you to do something now. Not for me, for them. Raise them with your whole heart. Let them be loud. Let them cry and fall and fail and rise. Let them ask questions. Let them paint walls and break things and dream too big. And when they miss me, tell them stories. Remind them I was real. Remind them I loved them with everything I had left. And you, Daniel, don't bury yourself in guilt. You're not the man who left. You're the man who came back and stayed. Live. Really live. Not for redemption, not for legacy. Live for joy. And when you miss me, find the stars. I'll be there. By the time he finished, tears soaked the paper, and the wind had picked up just enough to make the world feel like it was exhaling with him. He folded the letter carefully and placed it back in his coat. From down the hill he heard laughter, light, free. "Appa!" Minjun's voice called, cheeks flushed. "Come see. Haru found a frog." Daniel wiped his face with his sleeve, took a long breath, and stood. He walked down the hill slowly. The boys were crouched near a small patch of grass, wide-eyed with wonder. Haru held out his cupped hands carefully, revealing the tiny creature inside. "Look," he said. "It's green like Mom's favorite scarf." Daniel smiled, cracked his face open like sunrise. "She'd love that," he said, kneeling beside them. Minjun looked at him, searching his eyes. "Are you okay now?" He hesitated, then nodded. "I will be." Haru sat beside him. "Do you think she's watching us?" Daniel looked up at the sky, pale blue with soft clouds stretching over the horizon. "I know she is," he said. "And she wants us to be happy. Even without her?" Minjun asked, his voice trembling. Daniel pulled them both into his arms, pressing kisses to the tops of their heads. "She's not gone," he whispered. "She's just changed places." That night, they lit candles on the beach. Daniel helped the boys set small lanterns afloat on the tide, each one holding a wish. One for courage, one for comfort, one for memories that would never fade. And as the lights drifted farther out to sea, Daniel felt something shift in his chest. Not the pain. That would stay probably forever, but something else. Peace. He knelt beside his sons, arms wrapped around them, their small bodies leaning into his. "Do you know what tomorrow is?" he asked. Minjun blinked. "No, it's the first day of something new." Haru tilted his head. "Like a new story?" Daniel smiled. "Exactly like that." They stayed there, long after the last lantern had vanished into the horizon, until the sky bloomed with stars. And somewhere above them, maybe in the quietest corner of the night, one of them flickered just a little closer.